Yeah.
We got to talk about LA burning. We look at Mayor Karen Bass. I look at that situation and my immediate thought was, this is a hands-off leader. She leaves for a scheduled trip, yes. The fires have already started. Massive warnings, and you know how quickly it happened. She still keeps her scheduled trip to leave the country. This is a hands-off leader. We start there. What is the lesson for leaders? Because I look at that, and my initial response, Pat, is what a stunning example of tone deafness we've got here. Like, you're just going to leave it to the fire department, and you're not thinking, as the chief executive of this city, I should probably be hands-on, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, the first thing, and I'm not prepped on all these things.
Right, no, this is all coming to you from the headlines.
The first thing I wonder is, like, why does a person run for a mayor of a city, a big city?
Mm-hmm.
And too often it's for fame and for power.
Yeah.
And frankly, it should be because you want to be responsible and actually do that. But so many people don't run for office because they want to run things well and be a leader for others. Very infrequently do people run for office because they're interested in rolling up their sleeves. So I'm going to jump to something that shocked me. Trump goes out there and sits down at a meeting with all these Congress people, local Congress people, fire, police, emergency services, and he ran that meeting like he was a project manager.
That's right.
I'd never seen him do this.
Yeah, I watched it live. I was astounded by it.
I was like, he's like going, no, it shouldn't take that long. Why don't you guys get together and solve this problem? Here's the problem. These people need to get in here. And I was like, oh, there's so much practical wisdom here. And you contrast that with most politicians. And I was like, I'd never seen him so on the ground doing things, and I could see why he built buildings.
Well, let's contrast that, because she was sitting to his right, as you know. So his wife Melania is to his right, and Mayor Karen Bass is one seat over. And there was a particular moment where several questions were about, okay, how quickly can we get to our lots? And the problem, to set context, is people have lost everything, and they literally want to get to the lot that they own and clean it so they can begin the process of deciding or rebuilding. And so he goes on, Trump questions her about it, and it illustrates your point. Her response was, I'm paraphrasing, it was, we need to make sure that it's safe. It's going to be about a week. We got to make sure it's safe. And she kept coming back to what I'm going to call a policy.
Right.
Someone had told her, this is what you say. This is how long it's going to take. A bureaucrat.
I remember that moment.
Do you remember the moment?
And I remember thinking what he was about to say.
Right.
Like, why a week?
Right.
There are people standing out front right now, like ready to go.
That's right.
And there was a bureaucratic rule. Before that, it was going to be 18 months.
That's right. So what's happening in her leadership mind that's wrong that we as leaders can go, okay, here's the more practical response? Because she's relying now on a bureaucrat policy instead of being in the moment going, wait a second.
Well, and I don't know for sure, but has she ever been in a practical leadership? I don't know what her background is.
I don't know her background either.
But I want to be very clear about something. This is not about partisan politics.
No, we're not talking
at all.
We're talking about a real situation of crisis.
Right. And so we shouldn't be defending people or condemning people, never as a person, because of their party. This is like, what should a leader do in that moment? You know what's interesting? Because I remember, and he said, no, tomorrow. We should get them out there tomorrow. And I was like, this is pretty bold. But that's the kind of thing, like, get it done. And there was like safety and everything. Well, it started raining 2 days later. And the new worry was, oh no, now it's going to be toxic runoff. So before it rains, let's clean this up. There's never a perfect answer, but if it's a lawyer or oftentimes a politician who's driving it, it's always what's not going to get me in trouble versus what's the right thing for these people. And did you notice the people in the audience who were the people that lived there would break out into applause when he said, no, let's get you out there now.
Right.
So
Pat, let me tell you what I see here, and I'm just curious your take on this. If we're contrasting Trump and Mayor Bass here, he is not afraid. The guy's got 4 years to make his mark. This is his second time around. He's also Trump, right? Yeah. So there's that personality and style, but there is no fear, regardless of his motive. She looks like she's full of trepidation, very cautious.
Remember when she got off that plane and she couldn't
same
speak?
Deal. She didn't know what to say. Yeah. So my question is, we're talking about crisis here and how leaders can manage the unknown and this unbelievable set of things that have been thrust at you, yet you got to lead.
Right.
How much is fear driving it? To me, it seems like she is fearful, or any leader who just can't come up with a common sense solution is blinded by fear.
But
Do you see that?
Yeah, well, if, it's so interesting you say that because in many ways, and I've come to realize this in my life recently and doing a lot of research, there's kind of only two motivators in life, and it's fear and love.
Yeah.
And love is offense. Like, no, we got to do the right thing. And I'm not going to worry about that. And fear is like, I mean, even like in life, you can play to avoid losing in a game or to win. Mm-hmm. Or you can do something out of passion and love for something or because you're afraid of failing. And there's plenty of leaders who succeed for a long time in fear of failure, but it's not a joyful thing. And they often don't make necessarily the right decisions. And I think when you get shot twice or people attempt to kill you twice, he probably has a different perspective on like, what is he afraid of? And so I think he is going in, because he's different even than he was 5 years ago. He was in there like, no, we're going to do this.
So I was watching these headlines, I'm sure like many, and I'm going, okay, here's what I know the powers that be knew. They did know that they were in a drought. They did know that there was a ton of tinder in the form of dry brush. They know this. And yet it feels like in the aftermath of this, there was nobody thinking, what if? Again, I want to dive in for leaders here.
Do you remember Tylenol when there was the big Tylenol scare? We were kids and some people died.
Yes.
And it was and because they took Tylenol and the company, it was a big PR nightmare. Well, the CEO at the time, I mean, it was terrible. Imagine that he had been publicly warned 5 years before that happened. If you keep manufacturing with these ingredients, somebody's going to die. There's television clips of people saying, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. Any leader who is that negligent in their character and that makes a mistake that he'd been warned about and so many people die and lose their homes. I'm a believer in grace and mercy and everything else, but you don't leave people in power who demonstrate those things.
What do you see as the source of that?
So I'm a follower of Jesus. That's my primary identity. And I look at this concept called sin, and we're all sinners. So I don't get to call somebody evil or condemn them. We all need mercy. But I do look at virtue, and the chief virtue is humility. Mm-hmm. And all the other virtues kind of come under that. And the chief vice is pride. And I lived there. The ego there is massive. And we have far too long tolerated ego in politicians. And what we need to look at is humility. Now, people would go like, well, is Trump humble? He is a doer. He is bombastic, and he's a Churchill leader, but it's about the results. And so humility isn't false modesty and timidity. It's like, I want to be judged by what we accomplish and what actually makes other people's lives better. So it's not a personality thing. I think so many of these ego politicians go on TV and pretend they're all into the people, but deep down inside, you see what they really are about.
I think there's only one way to deal with that. I think you've got to have people around you who are willing to stick their finger in your face. And we've seen this throughout history. We see in the Bible where you have an ego problem or you are, but what happens is any leader, even a small businessman, if they only have yes people around them,
right,
and nobody to show them a mirror and say, hey,
I know.
It feels like that's the only shot a leader has at beating that if they're already an unhealthy ego.
Absolutely.